Okay, yeah, thanks for showing up despite the rain. I hope the people that are standing outside can get in. Yeah, so my name is Jutta. I'm the CEO of a company called Parity that we started around 3.5 years ago, based out of London and with a big team in Berlin. What we do is develop open source software for the decentralized web, cryptographic primitives, and in particular blockchain is one of the technologies that we're working on. Who of you have heard about Parity before? Some? Okay, cool. So what I want to do today is talk a bit more about what we're doing, what's the fundamental problem that we're solving, and how you can get involved, because building Web3 is not something you can do alone. If we manage to get it right, that will be an effort where many people have to get involved, and it's not just tech. It's on various levels. It's governance that will involve finding out how do we come up with different mechanisms for discussing and deciding about the way how these technologies should evolve, and that's by far not just a technological discussion. Yeah, so what do we do as a company? So I started to work in this space around five years ago, so when basically Ethereum was just coming along. And while for many years people said, oh yeah, blockchain is just some technology waiting for the problem to get solved, I actually came into this space because I had a problem. I wanted to see what's the best way of sharing my personal data, photos, whatever, in a decentralized way using cryptography. And I found people discussing online how to use Ethereum for that. And that's how I met the team back then, got involved and helped with getting it off the ground prior to the launch as the chief security. But then once it was live, realized there's so much more still to be done. I mean, there was the initial idea, oh yeah, Ethereum could be that platform to underpin what we call decentralized applications, and Gavin Wood had sort of come up with that framework of Web3 and the decentral computer, but it was really just an idea, and many tools needed to be built, and that was basically the reason why we started Parity, to build, to have a platform, a vehicle where we could develop these open source systems. So yeah, we've done work on several protocols since then. We've worked on Bitcoin. More recently, we've worked on Zcash. We've done a new implementation of the Zcash protocol that we're quite excited about. So combining blockchain technology with zero-knowledge proofs, which is an interesting technology to bring privacy to the blockchain, basically. And sort of also from a, I guess, academic point of view, an interesting moment now, because there's not just blockchain as a technology that's being developed, but also other cryptographic primitives and tools that will enable this decentral web. There's work we've done in terms of deployment. We've used a sort of private version of the Ethereum protocol, our implementation with the World Food Programme, to distribute aid to refugees. I think it's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, private consortium chain in the wild that's been used by more than 100,000 people every day, and shows, I guess, the operational efficiency that blockchain can bring, and the ease with which we can deploy and bring together multi-user applications. So that's one thing we've done. We've worked lower down the stack, a project called libp2p, which is about decentral networking. So really, there's a whole range of technologies that need to be developed to end up and get us to this decentralized future. And it all comes together for us as this notion of the Web3, so a decentral stack for the web. So yeah, what we're really trying to do is developing a fundamentally new way of creating online services with the fact that users will have much more agency, much more authority, much more sovereignty when they interact. Let's rewind to where we came from. So 1992, everything was really bare bone. The internet was still called information superhighway, bit like the terms comparable to ICOs today. Everything felt really bare bones and so much opportunity. But the problem was, although the internet or digitization led to a lot of efficiency gains, really we still engineered everything around intermediaries, intermediaries that basically made our offline world moving. It was the same thing we had to use because of the way how technology worked, how we architected the web. And that was really problematic. I don't know how you felt when you first started to use different apps on the web or on your phone. I do remember like certain moments which felt so off, like when I installed WhatsApp on my phone the first time. I was like, why do I have to share my whole address book? Why is there no option of doing it differently? Like, why does WhatsApp have to know who my ex-boyfriends are? Like, anything about me that can basically infer from this information. Or when I started to work in consulting, like we were researching things about like competitors and whatnot. So I was using Google. So it felt like, oh, they required some sort of confidentiality from me as an employee, but like really I was sharing implicitly all the information with Google. And to me, it came to a turning point really when the Snowden revelations happened. So I think that was the moment for me when I really started to grasp the whole impact and the whole scale of what was happening online and to our societies. Oh, this is now, well, okay, trust, I guess, is still the most important word here. Yeah, really the problem is that like the tools we have are fundamentally broken. Like, we're basically relying on very obscure services, obscure infrastructure that we don't have any idea of how it's working. There's APIs that we can interact with, like the slick interfaces, but we have no idea what's happening behind, and it leaves so many doors open for compromise, for abuse. And our fundamental belief is, like, despite the fact that we do have tools like the GDPR now, our fundamental belief is we do need better technology and open source systems like blockchain to build a new system, to have better infrastructure that can help us overcome the problems we've seen so far in society and really build a different structure. So I think that's neatly summarized by Mr. Fuller here. So we really need to come up with a new model to replace the old model. And that's where we think blockchain plays this key role of being that layer to manage expectations and help us to have a different relationship to the unknown, like everything we don't know what's happening behind it, like have more confidence that what we think is happening to our data, to our interactions online, is actually what's happening. Yeah. So, and that's what we call the Web3 stack, the peer-to-peer stack that will underpin this new internet in the future. With blockchain, this hard-coded expectation management system that helps you to really be sure and prove what's happening behind the scenes. So who's getting the money, who's getting the data, what's happening online. So another way of saying it, or like another way of describing Web3 is really that it decentralizes human control. So hopefully what this will mean is we don't have to rely on these mission statements that companies give you when they start, but in the end, like, yeah, they're companies, so they're just beholden to their shareholders, and in the end, don't do evil should be really turned into a can't do evil by using programmable systems like blockchain. Another way of looking at what is Web3, and we've heard that before, it really reduces the divide between the users and the providers. And I think that's one thing that hasn't been explored, or like that extent hasn't been explored that much so far yet. I think when we started Ethereum, it became, so the key step, like when we started Ethereum, was basically to understand, oh, there's the blockchain, you can do like payments, but then you can do much more. And so the idea was, oh yeah, you can have that platform to build applications. But really there's like a whole range of other things that you could do in addition once you sort of understand and grasp the flexibility and the new design space that you get when you work with decentralized systems. It will hopefully mean, many people in the space talk about like replacing institutions. The way how I think of blockchain is hopefully it will make just better institutions by enabling us to extend trust in a much more granular way. So not having to give blanket trust to, say, Google. Like, I do believe Google has like really high performance computing infrastructure, and I trust them to do that really, really well, but I don't trust them at all with my personal data. And is there ways of designing systems where we can really embed that and hard code that into the application? You've probably followed the whole discussions around Article 13. In some ways, decentralized systems are our biggest bet against monopolies, totalitarian systems, like things that enable true peer-to-peer interactions where we don't have to rely on whatever the intermediary decides, or in whatever way the intermediary might get regulated, because it's a peer-to-peer interaction in the first place. Yeah, can't read that either. Yeah, this was another summary again. Like I think all the points I described earlier about Web3, like that was very much from a user perspective. For us as technologists, the biggest excitement really lies into in having a really fundamentally new wave of technologies that enables us to design new systems, and that's across the entire stack. And that's really what we're busy with working on at the moment. So what's the state of the chain? And a lot of people have talked about earlier about different applications you can already build on top. But really, like, there's so much still to be done before we get to a point where everything's usable. There's scalability that needs to be figured out, and there's different ways of doing that. Privacy on the blockchain, I manage ZK snarks, but once you start looking at it, it's not that easy to integrate that. It's pretty hard, and in general, engineering decentralized systems is very, very tricky and hard, because you have to overcome very new technological challenges we haven't had before. Data availability is a problem, stability of peer-to-peer networks on the lowest level, and at the moment, what projects do when they try to attack one of these problems is basically they try to re-engineer everything from scratch. Same for governance. I talked earlier about the fact that we don't have control over our systems, but the fact that, well, with blockchain we might have that, but how do we do that really? How do we come up with frameworks for governing these systems? How we think about upgrades and all these things? And hopefully we can borrow a lot of ideas from liquid democracy and really try them out in a secure system. But it will be pretty tough and will take a long time to figure this out in a good way. So our answer to this really was to come up with basically a framework for making innovation easy, and that's what we call, it's a bit of a technical description, a heterogeneous multi-chain framework. But what lies behind is basically the idea that you need to make innovation easy on various different layers in the stack. So at the moment, if you look at Ethereum, what we really have is, on one hand, if you are a developer, you can either try to build a new blockchain, sort of what Zcash tried to do, or you take Ethereum and you use the smart contract system on top and you try to build an application. But that's really hard because it's not scalable and whatnot. But this heterogeneous multi-chain framework, we try to close that gap between those two single design points and basically give you a lot more flexibility on where you can easily experiment. So you can use a lot of the technology we've built when we build the various different blockchains, and don't have to re-engineer everything from scratch. Like you can have the networking, or you have the consensus engines already pre-built. So it makes it much easier for people to experiment on very specific things, be that scalability, governance, privacy. So that's really what we're trying to do. And as I say, it's a bit of a clunky description, but that's our core thesis, and I guess it's a bit contrarian to what we've heard earlier. Yeah, you can build all these dApps. Really, at this stage you cannot, but there's still like a lot of innovation that can be done and must be done, and we're hoping to make that possible through this framework. One of the technologies we've been building is called Substrate, and think of it really as the blockchain operating system. So an easy way to start a new blockchain, and then you can pick the various components, the different consensus, for example, in order to build your chain. Now, if you have a blockchain, one thing you need is a community to run it, to mine it. One project we're working on as well is a project called Polkadot, really to make it easy for you to tie into an existing network, so you don't have to build your community from scratch. So think of it maybe as the networking interface for your blockchain computer built on Substrate. Yeah, if you want to learn more about what we're doing, I'm really excited about this event that we're putting together with Web3 Foundation later this year in August, Web3 Summit. Particularly excited we have Edward Snowden speak there, so I'm really curious to hear what he has to say. But we're bringing together like tons of people from the space to work on the different components we need for the decentralized web. We're also hiring if you're interested. Have a look. And then, we have a lot of information online, different channels, GitHub, where you can come get involved with what we're building. Thanks.